This is so fun.
Are we recording yet? Are we
Not
live?
yet.
No, we're
Not
not
yet.
we're not
Where's-
official or anything.
Where's the YouTube?
Yeah, there you go.
Welcome back to the Pixelists Podcast, everybody. The podcast about all the nerdy things we love and enjoy. As always, except not always, because there's something a little bit special going on, as I'm sure you can tell. But we're your hosts. I'm Will. That's Blake. And I hope I'm pointing the right way. Down here is the none other than the illustrious, the man, the myth, the legend, Taylor Moore. You might know him as the sonic genius behind Worlds Beyond Number, the creator of Fortunate Horse, and I'm sure many other things that we may get into. A few that I'm actually really excited to pick your brain about. The creator of Chill Sitch, for those of you out there in the know. He is here with us today, blessed us with his presence. Taylor, thank you so much, man, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm terrified. About the other things you said you wanted to talk about. I'm shaking.
Well, you've definitely elevated the status of you being here just by like the Grizzly Adams beard, and you're definitely much more in
glorious.
shape than we are. So, this is a nice. I feel a little insecure, but it's going to be okay.
To the viewers, let me tell you something. These guys were showing off before we started recording. The thighs on these boys, you would not believe.
We told you that in confidence.
I was like, "Do you mind if I show you my thigh?" And you're like, "We just got to know each other, but sure." So.
I like it.
Well, we want to respect your time, but Will and I, we had this moment of really nerding out. I'm like, oh my gosh, what all do we want to ask this person?
Yeah.
Because we're meeting someone who we really appreciate your work. You've checked out some of our episodes. We talk a lot about how good the music is. So it's really exciting to have you on here. So for our listeners, I think we're going to jump into the conversation, but we're probably going to just jump around a lot, just because it's for Will and I. This is just a fun moment for us to be like, oh my gosh, I have all these questions I've been waiting to ask. But first things first, Taylor, I guess a generic question. What's it like working on The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One?
Dream come true. It's great. I hope that comes across in the show is how much fun we're constantly having.
100%.
I actually just came back. Oh, good. I just got back. For those who don't know, we record the show in batches that we call camp. The rest of the cast, of course, lives in the City of Angels, Los Angeles, California. And I'm over here in historic Bushwick, Brooklyn. I fly out to LA. We get a little house, and I build a recording studio in one of the bedrooms in the house. And then we spend, between 3 or 5 days together just hanging out there and recording lots of episodes and chats and bonus content during the day. It's a blast. We call it camp. It feels like a very cool summer camp. It's fun.
I'm imagining coming back to my spouse and be like, man, that was a lot of work. She's like, yeah, you just play D&D for 5 days straight. That's real hard, isn't it?
It can get intense. It
Yeah.
can get intense. And I think I've been podcasting for 15 years now. And I think just this weekend, I really cracked my setup.
Really?
I really I really perfected it.
Well,
If anyone wants to talk to me about input, output, and playback engine settings on Pro Tools for live recording, I'm your boy.
we may have to pick your brain on that then, yeah, because that's fascinating to me as well. And what you just described sounds like an absolute dream. Like just going to get a house with my buddies, playing D&D. That sounds incredible. And again, or go ahead.
Yeah, just tearing through cases of LaCroix, just ripping it up like a frat party.
Yeah.
Lou Wilson doing a handstand over a can of key lime LaCroix.
Yeah, that's when you get into your 30s and 40s. Things change a little bit for how you party.
The LaCroix stand. I love it.
Yeah.
But I was just going to ask, and again, if we don't ever want to get into how the sausage is made, so feel free to, whatever. But at one of those camps, would you say that will an entire arc be recorded? Like an entire chapter, or just a
big chunk of the chapter?
Okay.
Right? Because I think I know that we are 2 camps deep into arc 4.
Okay.
And we've still got, we think we can get done with arc 4 maybe in January with an extra long camp. So that will be 3 camps that go into that season.
Okay, wow. And will that be the longest yet, I imagine? Or not necessarily?
Oh God, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay,
I
yeah.
don't.
So
Oh,
We'll
that's
see,
so
because
interesting.
I mean, man plans and God laughs, right?
Right,
Like
yeah,
right.
me and Brendan come up with an idea. We think we can get it done in 5, 6, 7 more episodes. But then what happens at the table is the final arbiter of how long or
Right.
short anything's going to be. And if you plan too hard, it's like holding a bird, right? You hold it hold it tight enough not to let it go, but not
Yeah.
so tight that you turn it into a sort of blood biscuit. We don't want to have a blood biscuit show, so we got to leave that flexibility in the calendar for
That
what
makes
happens at the
total
table.
sense, especially with D&D being the medium. That yeah.
and you were mentioning before we hit record, you're a longtime D&D player, is that right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I started playing in high school, and then on and off through adulthood, and then I started working at Kickstarter during the
Yes.
Renaissance, the
Yeah.
dawn of
Yes.
the new era of tabletop.
Yes.
So we were, everybody working there at the time was just like, there were people starting up new games for employees because everybody was like, "Well, hell, if this is going to be our business, we should all understand what's going on."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I got to sort of start playing again because I hadn't played in a decade, and I got to start playing again, and it was like me, the head of games, my boss, and two of the founders of the company all played in like a 5-year long D&D Red Box Basic First Edition
Oh
game.
man.
Yeah.
So what brought you to like talk to me about like the ideation and creation of Fortunate Horse? Like how did you get to doing that?
Oh yeah, so I mean, I came up. I really sort of made my creative bones in the comedy scene, coming up to the UCB theater, where it was at that time it was just a bustling Star Wars cantina like hub of just the funniest, smartest, most prolific freaks you've ever met.
Yeah.
And everyone was making a ton of things. And then I started working at Kickstarter, first as the receptionist, and then I eventually became like, head of comedy and podcasts there. And so I had this bird's eye view of the entire creative industry,
Mm.
independent creative industry at that time, and you could just see it all, and it was just an incredible place to be. And I saw a lot of my friends from comedy um, sort of be absorbed into these giant content machines. At this time, the internet was all about viral videos on Facebook. That was the
Mm.
defining economic entertainment vehicle.
Yeah.
If you were a young comic and you wanted to get famous, there was no TikTok. It was go work at a late night show, uh, do commercials, or try to get viral on Facebook. That was the career move. And there were companies like College Humor and Super Deluxe and Funny or Die, and some of the late night shows too that were just sucking up all this comedy talent and then exploiting it. No one owned anything they were making. Everybody was working insane hours, exploited, so these celebrity investors or big network TV can just get all the money from them. And I just thought it was a pity. I was watching the smartest, funniest people in the English language alive in the world just be eaten by these machines. And so I started a little production company, and I was like, we're going to figure out how to create good, sustainable, independent, creative careers that allow creators to have agency and ownership over their work. And we did a lot of things. We we at first we like did a lot of stunt stuff. We published magazines. I would get 70 writers and artists in a day. We would all make like a 300-page magazine.
It's
Crazy. Actually,
incredible.
I have some here. Yeah. This is the first one, and this is where the name comes from. Is you're gonna have to flip this around, I think.
Yeah.
Fortunate Horse magazine. This like
Wow.
joke magazine that we would then like, I mean, it looks like a real magazine.
Yeah.
We made it in a day, and then we would hide it all over the city. We would put it in newsstands and libraries, leave it on the seat in a subway station, all this great stuff. And then we did 3 issues. The second issue was Mr. Cigarette, a magazine for cigarette lovers. Um, God, that's funny. Your mileage may vary, but so we're doing these like little stunny art projects, comedy projects, and then I heard, and I was still playing D&D all the time. And I had tried launching a podcast network before I went to Kickstarter. I had like 5 or 6 comedy podcasts going. This is back before most people knew what they were, before anyone was selling advertising. This is way before Serial, anything like that. And of course, it didn't do anything because I had no idea how to market it, and there wasn't enough people, but just desperately trying to get as much stuff recorded in my little, Brooklyn apartment as possible. And then I heard Balance. Right. Then I heard The Adventure Zone. Then I heard Balance. And if
Yeah.
you watch that show, you're essentially watching them, and you're really watching Griffin, who's DMing, editing, and composing the music for it. A lot of
Right.
the music for it. Watch him realize that, like, you start out with a bunch of goofy brothers in your family having a home game, and what it becomes is this grand cinematic audio fiction masterpiece that sort of breaks through all the rules that it started out with. And I just thought that was so compelling. I absolutely loved it. And I saw, like, this is that it was a path, that like this kind of storytelling, making this kind of show could be the thing.
Yeah.
That is the secret. The combination of economies of scale of distribution, low overhead in pre-production, sustainable production stuff, the power of serial narrative, and all these things. And Patreon was coming up at the time. Kickstarter was doing very well, and so I thought that could really be a path here to make incredible stuff and provide those sustainable, independent creative careers that I really, really wanted to help people make.
Man, that's incredible. You definitely had the vision. I love hearing people's stories like that, where they have like the unique perspective of being in that place where you can kind of see what the trend is. And yeah, man, I love that. I love just people like taking those creative risks. And something you said in particular about Fortunate Horse doing it in one day. Was that like an intentional creative decision, or was that just
Yes.
like you only had one day?
No. Scheduling is the villain of all creative projects,
True.
right? Scheduling is the BBG. Like, that is the big horrible villain that you have to kill. And so I thought, I can get a lot of people. I can get a lot of famous people, very talented people, if I only ask for one day. No ongoing scheduling.
I love
So
that.
how did you get connected with Brennan, and like did they know about your business and come to you, or like was this something like created collectively together whenever Worlds Beyond Number was like in the ideation stage? Like how did that happen?
Well, I met Brennan doing comedy in New York. We were both bumming around the UCB theater at the time. Him a lot more successfully than me. And we were buddies, and we used to hang out and spend late nights at the diner. And I got to join one of his home games set in his famous homebrew setting of Aerodane,
Okay.
and played that for a long time, and
Wow.
got to play a 3.5 game with Brennan
Oh, that's
as
Yeah.
a
so cool.
DM. And I remember after our first session, like, Hank, like, I was like, "Can I talk to you after class?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Hey, buddy, listen to me. You got to do this professionally. There's this is special. This is magic. This is unlike anything I've ever and I have had the world's best DMs. I'm a very lucky guy. I've had some of the greats.
Mm.
And I was just absolutely blown away, and I was just thinking, this is magic. And if we don't try to make something bigger than a home game with this, shame on us. But we were young. We really didn't have a model to follow. I don't think I'd heard the end of Balance at the time. And we actually, this is a fun, I don't think I've talked about this anywhere else. Brennan and I actually started a different podcast together right before he decided to move to LA. We were going to make a show called, this is ridiculous. We were going to make a show called Singularious about futurism, about, like, future
Yeah.
nutcases and
Yeah.
weird future stuff. Um, and we recorded a few episodes, and we were like, I don't think it's hitting. And the next week he was like, peace out. I'm going to Los Angeles to sink my fortune in topical sketch comedy. And sure enough, one baby eats a Tide Pod, and that guy's, one day later, that guy's got a career.
Yes.
And and we were in touch and everything. And and then he finally listened to Balance. I finally listened to all that stuff, and I think it finally got to him that it was possible, and that was where they grew Dimension 20 from.
Wow.
Mm.
Because that was during that transition of College Humor to
Right.
Dropout,
Yeah.
and that the new the new channel service and all that stuff. And sure enough, it was an absolute hit. And during this time, I was working at Kickstarter. I was started developing my own shows, Rude Tales of Magic, Fun City, those Stars of Space, stuff like that, running the studio. And so we both sort of parted ways, LA, New York, and then we were both making our actual play projects. And then the timing just worked out. It finally, fate finally let our paths cross, and he was like, I think I got it. I think I got the cast. And I was like, hell yeah, let's light it up.
Man, that's incredible. That's so special that it all, came full circle that way.
I'm the luckiest man in the world, and also I stick around like a barnacle. So if you really just never stop, eventually something is gonna meet.
Yeah.
Some sort of lines are gonna cross.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in like, all of our past failures and successes, they all kind of lead up to these special moments. And this is a perfect segue, actually. I'd love to know what Sex Your Food, what that brought to your Worlds Beyond Number experience.
Nothing.
I gotta say that was a very nice find on YouTube.
I bet. Yeah, so okay, here's what happened. So back in the day, everybody was trying to make these internet videos, and that was how you started your career. And everyone was making like 10-episode web series about roommates in the big city, just
Yeah.
trying to live, laugh, and love, if you can get it. And it was just like, it was all so expensive and complicated and boring as shit. And so I was like, fuck it, I want to make a web series that is just like, I'm gonna shoot 10 episodes in a day, and we're gonna do it for $100. And so that's where Sex Your Food came from.
I love
And
it.
at the time, it's funny because like Sex Your Food was meant to sort of make fun of like people making tutorials on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because at the time, this is so long ago, at the time, nobody was good at it yet. So everyone on YouTube that was doing a tutorial was like kind of nervous and a little scared. And maybe some of them didn't really have the expertise necessary to like teach anyone. Now YouTube tutorials are like the most polished entertainment, like just every detail combed over, super confident, articulate presenters. Back in the day, that was not the case. I swear to God. I swear. If those of you old enough to remember will back me up on this. And so I made these videos of this guy determining the sex of food products based on an actual thing that happened to me when I was a kid, and my dad took me to a rabbit farm to buy rabbits.
No.
And the farmer my dad was like, well, how do I know if they're male or female? And this is insane. I didn't know this conversation was going here. And so the farmer's like, hold on, let me check. And so he reached down and he pulled up the rabbit and just stuck his finger up inside the rabbit,
No.
the back end, and just wiggling it around for like 20, 30 seconds. And then he's like, that one's a girl. He did that for 5, just watching this guy. Just watching this man shove his finger up rabbits to say, that's what they call it, sexing the rabbit. You're determining the sex of the rabbit. And just like a brand, like someone, like a hot iron just imprinted that memory on every brain cell.
Yeah, it's a canon event right there.
So it was like, yeah, I was like, so my partner, Kirk Larson, a great director and writer, who also did all the effects for Sex Your Food. I was just like, hey, so I'm just going to determine the sex of a bowl of macaroni and cheese, and that's it. It'll take 5 minutes to shoot. One day we're done.
I honestly loved it, and it did feel like I stepped in a time machine back to early YouTube, and I picked up on the satire, and I honestly thought that like if you made that today, I feel like it would go mega viral. Like I think that was way ahead of its time.
I don't know. I mean, I just feel like I was just copying Tim and Eric, just as like as like a proof of concept of like, let's make a lot of something cheap and fast. And then True TV bought 2 seasons of it. Insane.
I didn't know that part.
This is back in the zero interest rate days. So companies had all this capital to just burn. And so True TV had a sketch comedy show called Late Night Snack with Rachel Dratch, where it was essentially their farm team for narrative comedy content. And so they would just buy all these sketches from everybody and put it on Late Night Snack. And they bought like 20 episodes of it.
That's incredible.
Truly.
And
I don't know where to take the conversation after hearing the story about the rabbit. I'm just... I think if I was there, I'd be like, I think you got there was a point where you went like, I think you would have figured it out, but then you went like 2 or 3 minutes longer.
Like this can't be taken. This is not how it is done. Surely, it very much is.
Well, since I kind of derailed us, let me put us back on a little bit. So You mentioned the magazine happening in one day, and I alluded to it earlier, the Chill Sitch, which Blake, I don't know if you're familiar or not, but it was a Twitter account. And I followed it back in the day, and I only
What?
recently realized that it was you. Yeah. And I too had a little foray into like narrative Twitter back in like 2009, 2010. I
Oh,
created like
really?
a micro fiction account. And it was a really
Uh-huh.
interesting creative exercise. And I'm building to the point here of addition by subtraction, having to figure out a way to tell a story in 140 characters, which I'm assuming you've had that same experience too with Chill Sitch, but then also like the time constraint of having to make that magazine in a day. I'm wondering, like, do you bring that to your creative process of like when you're trying to
Absolutely.
figure out how do I set the vibe here is maybe less more? I just wanted to pick your
Absolutely.
brain on that.
100%. It is just that's a very good question. That's a very astute observation. I mean, like the biggest enemy is the blank page, right?
Right.
Like just watching that cursor tick at the top of a Google Doc is a terrifying sight. I don't ever want to see it. I hate it. Same with me. It's like a blank Pro Tools session. It's just like a nightmare. But if you say, okay, well, instead of having the entire universe of options, and this is an old trick, right? Uh, Instead of having the entire universe of options, I'm going to say, well, it's a scene about a witch. Let's assign a witch an instrument, and that'll be the instrument. So just by making that creative decision, a limitation that no one else put on me, only me, now I know exactly where to start. I know what to click on next. I know what button to press to bring it up. And so a lot of the work I do um, is to like put myself in a box
Yeah.
because being in that box gives me it's like a dog in a kennel. It's just very comfortable. I feel very safe. And then, it gives you the comfort that you can really start to fill that box up. And then if you want to break out of it, you can.
Right.
But making that decision really helps with the first wave of creation when you're
You
working on
know,
something new.
what's really interesting about that too is like, functionally, like that works for you from like a practical perspective, but then as a
Mhm.
listener, these things become really cool, like cultural pieces of it's part of the culture of the podcast. Like, I think of Lou Wilson, Ursulon has like his theme song, and like when it's sort of like that ephemeral, celestial music playing, I'm like, oh, there's something happening here. And I
Mhm,
think also
mhm.
Indri had a very like precise, like kind of melancholy-ish track associated with her. So these things that like you've made these decisions to make your process easier so that it's not just like spilling spaghetti noodles everywhere and trying to like get a grip on something. And then it has like this really nice, like sort of double effect of now as the listener, I'm like, oh, okay. Like I'm sort of subconsciously now associating different things with these decisions you've made. I think it lifts the
Mhm.
show.
Oh, thank
100%.
you so much. Yeah, and that just comes with practice, because once you make enough of those decisions, you learn how to make one decision that works in 2 ways or 3 ways or 4 ways. So you say, "We gotta pick a thematic element," and in choosing that thematic element, that also helps us get started because we know what that element's gonna be, we know what the theme is. And it's also just like it's also too like a dance with the people at the table, where
Yeah.
it's like, "Well, if you do this, I'm gonna do this." And so then I can follow them, and we sort of switch places leading the dance.
Right.
Um, uh, and they know how the show is going to react to the decisions they make. And so I get to sort of play with them.
So yeah, are you like present at the table? Because I'm curious, like how much raw is there compared to the actual output? Because I know an episode's around, at its shortest form, a little bit over an hour, and sometimes longer, closer to 2 hours. Do you
Yeah.
guys have like much longer than that of raw, or is about what you hear recorded what gets published?
We try to keep raw tape to 2 hours. And then we edit it down to whatever we think is good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because it seems I can't explain why, but it seems to me that once a episode session goes past 2 hours, each minute past 2 hours takes twice as long to edit as the previous minute. So like, and I think it has to do with the way that improvisation works, where you're
Yeah.
always building on what has just happened. And so once enough stuff has happened, your building becomes so complicated that everything matters, nothing can go, and there's a lot of threads. I don't
Yeah.
know. I really don't know why that is the case, but I have found in my experience that beyond 2 hours, the post production time just booms out.
Mm.
So
Well,
2 hours and less is what we like
and
to keep.
Will, I was thinking about the thing you mentioned about, being intentional with the 140 characters. My only experience to like produced D&D was Critical Role before Worlds Beyond,
Yeah.
and you'd have 4 or 5 hour episodes. So when I first looked at Worlds Beyond, I was like, man, these are so short. But then like actually listening to it, I'm like, holy cow, this was like a 90-minute car crash of like insanity that
Yeah.
was so like meaty and good. So it's been a very nice change. Though I love it so much, I'm always like, oh, I wish it was tomorrow or next
Yeah.
week for the next
Yeah.
episode.
I feel you.
100%.
I feel you. Yeah, people, but it's like that at the table too. Like, people, I think that the show is more edited than it is. Most of the stuff we cut out is just like vocal statics, like or like pauses that don't help, or I'm sure you've experienced this in a home game, and you've seen players do it in other APs. The group will kind of come up with sort of I call it a cul-de-sac, a sort of idea that doesn't go anywhere, and then they come back
Yes.
to where they were anyway, and it never has any impact,
Yeah.
which is a natural consequence of human
Yeah.
beings communicating and thinking
Right.
together. And sometimes those stay in, and sometimes it's like, oh, this is no, like we're going from here to here. We don't
Yeah.
have to do this.
It's like,
As
yeah,
that cul-de-sac goes. Yeah,
it's the
but no,
45 minute. Sorry, go ahead.
no. Go ahead.
I was just saying it's where the party plans for 45 minutes and then
Yes.
there is
Yeah.
literally no decision at the end of it. You're like,
Yeah, and it's like, as an editor, it's like some of that planning is very important, and what happens later is not going to make sense or have an emotional arc for the listener. But some of that planning, it's a gotta go.
That makes
and
sen's
and
Now
I
I'm
like
about to show you. I'm about to show you something that you only get when you do Zoom calls with me, and that's my enormous mug.
I did notice
That
it. Yeah.
everyone likes to comment on the mug.
I love it.
Yeah.
What does it say on it?
I bet you can't. I think it's like a frat, like novelty, like joke mug. I don't know. All I know is I fill this with green tea, and I don't have to go downstairs every 20 minutes.
I love it. It's efficient.
I recommend the biggest drinking vessel you can have. Productivity tip.
I have a huge water bottle, so I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a
And I also
question.
have
Or go ahead.
I have a secondary large vessel, which is a liter graduated beaker.
Is that just in case of emergencies?
That's
In
like
case I have to measure something.
that's the pea cup for the big glass that you have.
For the intense editing
Gotta measure
sessions.
it. Yeah. Yes. You got to know what you're putting out.
That's
Yeah.
right. So okay, I was gonna ask. You say that you don't typically go over 2 hours. So like, if you're sitting down at camp, will there be? So I'm just pulling let's say, random episode, right? Let's say it's an hour and 30 minutes runtime after you've produced it and edited it.
Mhm.
Will the raw file where the episode ended, will the session have ended there, or could the session have been 5 hours long and then you guys decide, let's cut an episode there, here, there?
Great question. So, this is good advice for AP producers too. Try to keep your sessions to one recording session per episode,
Okay.
because as doesn't matter how talented your cast is, and I work with some fucking firecrackers. It does not matter how talented they are. The natural human emotional arc is more energetic and more whole, and just more fun and more structurally sound if you keep it to one recording session per episode. I've worked on shows where we stitch together episodes from multiple recording sessions. It adds a lot of work, and I think it
Yeah.
deadens a lot of the emotional impact of the narrative. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Well, people can probably like feel the momentum. Like I
Yeah.
think that's one of my funnest parts of listening to the show is like the natural momentum of you can hear the cast like really riffing well with Brennan, and
Mhm.
it feels like you would be robbing something by stitching to get like, yeah,
Yeah.
this first 30 minutes was from a Tuesday and the next 15 minutes was from 2 weeks later, and I
Yeah.
think we'd lose that.
Yeah, it would suck all the energy out of it. There's so much like subconscious
Mm.
motion to the way the decisions they make and the way they talk, and the word. I mean, down to word choice and the energy in the line delivery that I think you would lose if you break it up. It's fun too, and like you were talking earlier, it's like making that box, right? We got 2 hour box,
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
so many times, I think some really fun decisions that have happened at the end of a session are because they know we can't go on forever.
Mhm.
So that limitation, again, like forces you to make fun, energetic choices.
Yeah.
Always something to look out.
Now, I think that answers my next question, but I was just curious. Since it is since it's not you're just hosting up the live recording and you do have the option to kind of like, oh, let's tweak this. Is there ever any ADR or reshoots of like a line where it's like, for whatever reason, the recording messed up? So you're like, hey, Brennan, can you come like repeat that? Have you guys ever have to do anything like that?
Very rarely, but it has happened. The recording setup I used to have rigged, you could yell into it and it would peak. And so, if someone was screaming, we had to do a pickup and like back off the mic, do it again.
Yeah.
Now, the new setup, 32-bit float audio, baby, we love it. You can scream, you can whisper. I get all that sound in there just fine.
Yeah, I've seen the screenshot of the giant microphone, and as a
All right.
longtime podcaster, I was like, "What is this?"
That's called the iconic Mars microphone isolation booth. So it's not the microphone. It's a giant hollow ball that
Yeah.
fits on, and that model specifically in the pictures is for the SM7B, one of these beautiful bad boys.
Uh-huh.
If you've ever seen it, someone pretend to be on a podcast on TikTok, this is the prop that they use. And that helps with mic bleed. So we got these 4 people all talking at the table.
Yes.
I don't
makes
want
sense.
Brennan's voice on Erica's track, because I might have to pull Erica's track out, and so I don't want
Right.
Brennan in the background. If I want to feature Erica's dialogue, I don't want to hear crosstalk. So those it's a big hollow ball, and it goes on the mic, and that helps shield the mic from everyone else's voice. And that means that it's much easier to add environmental reverb, environmental effect to the voices, because it sounds like they're in different studios.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the microphone. It's not the microphone.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I didn't even think
Everyone
about that.
online. Everyone online making fun of me because I got the basketball size.
This is justice for Taylor Moore on our podcast. I love it.
I recommend them. You can also buy these big foam balls on Amazon for like 50 cents and make your own, which I used to have.
We might have to get some, even though we're not in the same room, Blake, just as the homage.
We try to keep the production status. Sorry, my 4-year-old is banging on the door saying she has to show me something, but we try to keep.
You guys are on video. Can you imagine shooting the video with
Just
a
like-
giant black basketball in front of your face?
Well, and I do like podcasting professionally anyway. And I feel like to actually be considered a professional, I either need to get this or I have to avoid it, depending on how the internet reacts to it, I guess.
I don't know if your listeners give a shit, but it's a great way to
True.
deal with it's a great way to deal with echo, even if you're recording by yourself. It stops so instead of soundproofing a whole room, you just carry this thing, and it squishes flat. So I know some VO artists that actually take one on like the road with them.
Oh,
They
wow.
can pop it on. It doesn't matter where they are. No reverb.
Speaking of on the road, I remember I saw your photo of your like setup in an airport. I think you
Yes.
tweeted out. I'm very impressed that you were able to do that on the go.
Yeah, man. Look at this. This thing rules. Okay. This is a full 88 key keyboard that folds up big enough to go into my carry-on. And for all you MIDI musicians out there, it's got velocity sensitivity. I love this thing so much. I travel a lot, especially in August, because that's where all the cons are. And so it's very important to me that I can work on the road.
Yeah.
Also, if you're stuck on an airplane for 5 or 6 hours, that is a great time to just like make some simple music.
Yeah.
And I also have, this is so ridiculous. So I can't bring that out on the plane. So I have this little guy that actually is exactly the width of a Delta airline, like the back of the seat tray. The tray thing.
Yeah,
that will
perfect.
sit on top of my laptop, and it's got these rubber feet so it doesn't hit the buttons. So this just sits on top of the computer, and I can fill around there. I have nailed the mobile setup. And so, yeah, so we were, and that was for the finale. The picture I shared online, if you could see that in the Delta Lounge, and I've got like a whole recording studio set up. Yeah, I mean I was flying around. I was going to Gen Con, going to XOXO, all these things, and camp in LA and everything. And yeah, and I think like the last half hour of the finale was all done in airport waiting rooms and lounges.
That's crazy. Very impressed. And okay, I meant to ask you this way earlier, but the whole legend, if we can call it that, is that you taught yourself how to do this for the show. Like you've never done this type of work before, but clearly you have experience in music and music theory, at least by the way you talk about it. So I would just love to
Well,
hear your journey there.
I knew how to play like 5 or 6 acoustic guitar chords in college. I like everybody goes through the requisite Wonderwall years.
Right.
And
Right.
I could play a couple of Bob Dylan, and some Gillian Welch songs. And but that was it. That was it. I couldn't tell you what string on the guitar was what, or what note was who, or I didn't know anything about it. Just the acoustic guitar chords, the same ones everybody knows. And then for 20 years, I didn't do anything with music at all. Um, and then I was like, yeah, let's make this show. Don't worry, I can make all original music for us. And then they're like, okay, that sounds good. And I thought, oh no, I have to learn how to make a bunch of original music for all of us. And so I did. I took one piano class where I learned the basics of like this is what a chord is, this is what a
Yeah,
triad is, the very basics, and then just YouTube,
that's amazing.
That's
just YouTube
insane.
videos.
And I
That's
think
insane.
what I love about that too is, and I don't mean this in a rude way, but I feel like as the story has gone on, the music has only like the production has only gotten better and better.
Oh, thank you. That's
Which
because I'm learning how to do
well,
it.
I was gonna say not that it wasn't ever bad. It was always good, and we talked about it from those early episodes. But there was like a moment, I think, like around the end of the Port Talon arc, where Will and I were just. It was almost every YouTube video we were like, "Dude, Taylor Moore, like this is getting noticeably very good." So you gotta, I'm sure you appreciate, your own learning process with that, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, like, I try to figure something new out every episode, even if it's just an extremely minor thing for my own edification. The listeners will never be able to pick up on it. Like, oh, the voice leading is a little bit better in this cue, or
Mm.
oh, that's a more interesting chord progression than he would. So I'll take a theme and rework it so it's like you can hear some cues repeated, but I'm always like taking the themes and the motifs and the cells and like trying to make them better or learn from them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not fun.
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
and I also love just like your creativity with like I think about the moments when like the subtle details of like when Marara is speaking and you've like muffled Brennan's audio a little bit to give the impression of like talking behind the mask and
Oh yeah. Yeah.
like little details like that are just really fun for me and kind of bring
Oh,
this world that we can't see, we can only hear it, but like really makes it tangible and
Yeah.
brings it to life.
yeah. That was a very fun. Yeah. That's a really good example of like a really small thing to just like bump a character up a bit, especially because I really see like I really feel like it is very fun to hear what the cast want. You can hear what they want it to be,
Yeah.
but they can't do it, right? Like Brennan can do a voice, but he can't like replicate the physics of having a porcelain mask in front of your
Right.
face.
Yes.
So I can be like, all right, so the voice is created, and then it reverberates, and then it's muffled. So it's Brennan's voice, EQ it, have the reverb, but then we hear a heavily EQ'd, like no high, no low on the reverb. So it sounds like his voice is echoing behind an object that the sound is passing through. It's great. And so I get to then go and like figure out the way to do it. Like a special effects guy or a animator looking at a script. I get to like find a fun way to like instantiate their vision into audio reality. And when I can do it when I can achieve what I think they were going for, ooh, that's a good day. That feels good.
I mean, I don't want to just like heap praise and make you uncomfortable, but
Please, please, please. My parents still don't understand what my job is, so you got to make up for a lot of lost time.
Like, you still doing that thing? You're like, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
real job, but thanks.
But yeah, your work is incredible. It legitimately adds a whole nother dimension to the story. Like I don't want to just get hyperbolic here, but I feel like it's as important as Brennan's DMing. Like the
Yep.
music sets the tone and the vibe. Like it really takes it to the next level. And I don't think the show would be anywhere near what it is without your contribution to it. And it's
Oh, thank you
insane
so
that
much.
you've been
That's
teaching
extremely
yourself
kind.
this.
Yeah, make sure
Um,
Brendan knows that you are the heart and soul of this thing. And We will riot.
No.
No, I'm just kidding.
The egos I have to deal with. You're not gonna believe. No, I mean, we like we call it the team. I mean, like it's just, especially when we're all together in LA. And and it is very strong with Worlds Beyond Number, but it's not unique to Worlds Beyond Number. I felt like this on all the shows I've worked on. Is you just get in the flow of working with these other creative volcanoes. I mean, just like
Yeah.
the energy and the intelligence and the I don't want to say magic. I don't want to sound like a freak.
No, I'm with you.
I'm not
Yeah.
selling crystals to anybody, but like
No, yeah.
I know what you mean.
orgone in the space is,
Yeah.
it's tense.
Like lightning in a bottle.
And
Yeah, it's very
yeah,
palpable.
and
Yeah.
you just get completely carried away with it. And in those moments where you're not thinking about anything but the bit, what you're playing at, the game, the story, I mean, it really does feel just like you're flying. I mean, it is one of those great moments. And getting to work with them is an absolute dream. I mean, it's so cool. I mean, I feel like I'm on the 96 Bulls all the time. Like you just have so much love and affection and respect for like even just the smallest decision someone makes, and it really does feel like everyone's got a grip on this thing and we're all
Yeah.
lifting it at the same time. It's a
What
good time.
what's it like just like seeing the cast like their brilliance on display? Like some of these so there's moments where it feels like they were like it almost feels like Erika Ishii has been meant to play Ame long
Yes,
before
yeah.
long before this show. So when you're sitting at the table and like you're seeing this literal, I mean, I will call it magic. For me, it feels magical and it's incredible. And like I said, it's brilliant to listen to. How do you stay like grounded in the sense of like the practicality of like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna cut that, and as they're talking, I'm gonna like sort of like creating the sauce as it's happening
Yeah.
while also not
Yes.
getting lost in like the oh my gosh, what just happened? Oh, I should be doing my job. Or like, I feel like I'd be so
Yeah.
lost in that.
Well, it's a skill that comes with practice. So I was very bad at it at first, but eventually you get producer brain, which is just that you're able to like monitor the CPU usage on your computer, and make sure that all the devices are connected and working with one eye, and the
Yeah.
other half of your brain is like in fairyland.
Yes.
You've been taken under the barrow mound and you're dancing till dawn.
Yes.
And both these things are happening completely at once. And now it's easy, but it took time to learn. It was not easy at first. And I made some big mistakes early on of either forgetting to listen to the show because I'm doing some tech thing, or completely shitting the bed on some tech thing because I got caught up in some riff, Branson Reese or Mike Rignett is doing on one of the other shows. Now I've got a good handle on it, thank God. And now, finally, after 15 years, I have perfected my live recording setup, so it's a little bit easier.
I love
But
that.
I also, our recording setup in LA, I have discovered that I can make a lot of noise where I sit that doesn't end up on tape.
Mm.
So but they can hear me, but it doesn't show up on the microphone. So they will make me laugh, and then they will brag about it. And, and I mostly cut that out of the show because I'm not a character in the show. Get me out of there. And you can't hear me laughing, so you don't know what they're reacting to. But they will, if they get me really good, they'll hear me laughing and they'll take a victory lap for it. Yeah.
I
There
love
was
it.
a moment in this. So the final day of this camp, I think we put down 3 of the best episodes we've ever made.
Yes. They were incredible.
And it just
Or
bang, bang,
well,
bang, bang, bang.
end of arc 3 were incredible. I think maybe you mentioned you're
Oh,
on arc
thank you.
4. So
Yes, yeah. So at this most recent camp,
Yeah,
our
okay.
final day was 3 back-to-back episodes, and I think it's story and lore and world-wise, it is up there with the peak of the show. Maybe it's the best we've done yet. It's great. And I mean, I can say this because I'm a listener. I have not touched it yet, so I'm not remarking on like my greatness or anything of me. Just what they put down at the table, stellar. And at the end of the second episode of that run, Brennan said a line, and I was sure that's the last line. He cannot go past that. And it was so perfect, I just started screaming. I mean, it was just like It's like being at a game and watching your team score
Yeah.
the winning
Yeah.
point with nothing left on the clock.
Yeah.
Like if it had been a college football game, everyone would have run down to the stadium and just swarmed the field and taken the goalpost down, like 100%. But I'm the only one fucking there, so I can't. It's if I just run in and like dump a thing of Gatorade on Abria, I'm the crazy one. And we have to have a talk about my conduct at camp.
Yeah.
It's not fair. So I just let out screams. I didn't care if the episode was over. I was like, I don't care. That's the last line. I'm hooting and hollering. Thank God it was the end. And you will not hear my screams on the finished audio. But no, I mean, sometimes I still get caught up in the story. I'm a human being.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, it would be hard not to just freak out, be like in the room. So I can't relate to that, but I totally understand. And I actually had a question about the interplay with Brennan. Do you guys have like lore discussions to help inform like the vibe of we're gonna go to the Citadel and he's like, this is what I think it should sound like, or is it more of you can kind of make that yourself, or is it both? Ow.
We are so synced up. We had at the very beginning of the show, back before we recorded a word, we had a big long meeting about the sound and music of the show. And that was kind of the last time Brennan and me had a big music meeting. We are just completely synced up. And if I come up with an idea that I think might sound unusual to them, I'll talk about it. I'll be
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm thinking about this, And I don't think they've ever made a request. Like we talk so much about story and lore and everything that we're constantly referencing other work. We're constantly referencing movies, TVs, books, just myths and legends and other works and operas and ballets and like everything, all the work, everything, all of it, everything, all of it. So we are always on the same page about what the other person's thinking.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty confident that like I know exactly what needs to go where. I mean, like when the show first started, I was talking with Bria about Wizards, the sound of Wizards, and we had both independently like, oh, it's got to be a like marching band. It's got to be
Yeah.
like a military marching band, independently, just exactly on the same wavelength. And when I wrote the Rain Road, the song that helps close out the first arc, um, like I don't think. I wrote some lyrics and reached out to Brendan, and then he pitched some, and then we wrote the words together, and the music is just like a very straightforward, like old folk tune structure. I mean, yeah, we're just sort of all on the same page, and we're constantly referencing things to each other, and absolutely. As much as I love everything else, learning how to make music changed my life. It's just so important to me now. But my favorite part of the job is getting to be the person that Brennan bounces his ideas off of, because you can't do it with the players,
Right.
and
Right.
so we'll sneak off to another. Sometimes we have in meetings in between camp, and he wants to talk about big decisions for an upcoming arc or
Yeah.
how to handle a big reveal or a big plot move. But when we're out at camp, we'll scurry off into like one of the little bedrooms out back or out into the woods behind the house, and we'll talk about story, and I'll get to hear what he's thinking and all that stuff. Those meetings are my favorite.
Oh man,
Those meetings are my favorite.
I have to imagine. I mean, Brennan in my mind is the GOAT from like there's something so magical from his DMing. So to be in that privileged position, what if I was like, can you make that happen, by the way? You're like, that's getting weird, but
It's incredible. I mean, he understands story and character and arc and genre so well from just a lifetime of lovingly and energetically wrapping himself in it. I mean, I'm sure if you're listening to this, you probably are familiar with Brennan's story of, Ray's playing these sorts of like games and worked at the LARP summer camp and all that stuff. I mean, just thousands and thousands of hours of working and reading and loving it. And he just has a command of all these things that makes working with him in that way just incredibly rewarding. It is so much fun. I mean, you feel like you're in like a giant story mech and you
Yeah.
can just punch through buildings. You feel infinitely powerful. It's great. It's really fantastic, and he is so extremely thoughtful and kind, and yeah, that guy has a real team spirit.
Mm.
Because we also have to talk about how the cast is going to react, and he's got a beat on them. He really understands what they as uh, player characters want, what they're going to do, but also as colleagues, as peers,
Yeah.
as business partners and creative partners, what they are after. And that's never out of the room, ever. No, nothing is ever made without considering all those factors of the other people, and it creates this just incredibly cool vibe of like
Yeah.
mutual support in the whole thing. Yeah, I love those. Love the story meetings are my favorite part. Breaking story rules. If I could just quit everything else in my life and hang out with my DMs in a bedroom and just come up
Yes.
with stories, I would do that until the universe turns into a cold entropic soup.
That's the
That is
dream.
my
That's the
all-time
dream.
deal. Yes.
And I was gonna say, you can feel that at the table. Like you can feel that trust, you can feel that passion. It comes through from everyone, including you, of course. Like we've, I'm sure you've heard us talk about it, but we gush over Brennan all the time. But I can feel your passion and intentionality behind like the smallest decisions, and again, it elevates everything. And example from your fireside chat you did talking about the voice that went behind the stranger. That was so
Oh,
fascinating to
yeah.
hear all of the
Yeah.
sounds that you put into that. Like I think it was a jaguar growling and like the sound of
Mhm.
stones to emulate power.
Yeah.
That
Mhm.
like, you could easily phone it in and just put like, a Darth Vader, 99-cent thing you buy on Fruity Loops on the voice. But no, you go the extra mile
Sure, sure.
and that really comes through. And is there any like this the stranger one fascinated me, so I got to ask: are there any other like crazy sounds you've put in other NPCs' voices or anything like that?
Oh, interesting. Um, I mean, Arima, like, so I always pay very close attention to the voice of the great spirits.
Hmm.
So if you hear a great spirit talking, and occasionally I'll mess with the voice of a lesser spirit. There's a few that have had effects, like Ursulan's brother in the spirit world. I think had an effect on his voice because that's a being made of like wicker and flame and
Yeah.
shouldn't sound like a normal person. But most spirits just sound like however Brennan's character thing. But the great spirits, I always try to think about, how do I get across to the listener that that they're hearing the thoughts of a eternal idea.
Mm.
Like this is a living truth of reality is speaking. We have to make that special. That has to be supernal. And in the way that we and then the question is, all right, well, how do we design it? Biggest thing is always reverb, because reverb implies space. So if I'm in a small space and someone speaks and their voice has a deep resonant reverb, that's because they exist in a space I can't see, right?
Hmm.
So like they exist in a giant unknowable realm of mystery and abstraction. So their voice sounds like it's in this cathedral, even though we're just in a little tiny hut in the woods. And so that is one way to indicate like I am not from here. You are
Right.
hearing something that's coming from somewhere else. I know that with Arima, there's a lot of like reverb and panning, and there's like a lot of sliding as like like a lot of leaves rustling on the
Mm.
ground. You hear some tightening of leather and rope that sounds like growing plants.
Yes.
But I think the cool thing with Arima is her archetype is the devouring mother, right?
Yeah.
And Brennan loves devouring mother characters, loves them. If you look in Brennan's work, there's a lot of devouring mother archetypes, and Arima's a really good example. And so as she speaks, you hear her all around you, right? Because she is the smotherer, the choker. And so whenever Arima talks, she's everywhere around you. She envelops. Other great spirits. I mean, Naram was just this giant cetacea. She'd scream, uh, you know. And as we hear from more, yeah, I mean, I do sneak in a lot of foreshadowing and little secret connections between a lot of the things. Um, like you hear you hear when here's one. Okay. When Ame enters the Palace of the Wind and Stars at the North Pole for the first time, and the Enclave is about to begin. And there's this parade of the Witches of Elders into the space. But then at the end, we see Marara is already sitting at the stone table. She's just apparated there, apparently, and she's tapping her finger. And as she taps that big clicky claw, it turns into the same gong of the grandfather clock that we heard at the end of the scene where Ame is in the cave beneath the Ren's cottage.
Yes.
She sees the
Wow.
illusion of them, and she's talking about like time is running out. Time is running out. And you hear like these big ticks ending with this big metal clang. And so that Marara's, tapping finger turns back into that reminder that something big and heavy is coming and you can't stop it.
Oh,
Stuff like that.
that's
Always trying
so
to always
good.
trying yeah, tie things back to themselves and
I
to everything else around them.
I love this just makes me love the show more because of just the deep passion and creativity that's gone into it. Just like as an aside, do you guys like you and the cast as a whole? Do y'all keep a pulse on people's thoughts on social media stuff? Like, because I know one thing Will and I have
I
talked about
read
a
a
lot.
lot. Yeah, some of us do and some of us do not. So, I'm on Twitter. God damn me to hell. I shouldn't be.
Yeah.
For a million reasons, including it makes me incredibly sad most of the time. But yeah, I tend to see a lot of social media stuff, and I want to watch what people are saying. There's some places I specifically don't go, like just so fans can have their space to themselves and not feel
Yeah.
like someone's watching over their shoulder all the time. Like I wouldn't want that, and also like even though it hurts my feelings, we should all be able to complain about our stories, you know,
Mm.
and bitch and moan and celebrate and pump our fist in the air, all those things without fear that we're gonna destroy someone's career or hurt their feelings. So, there's some places I stay out of, but no, some of us don't look at all. Some of us look at everything all the time.
Mm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
I hate it.
well,
I hate it.
all I was gonna add was Will and I have said this on the channel of I feel like we have a pretty honest take. Like no one's paying us to do this stuff. But also Will and I have said before many times, we're like, hey, this is not like we're pretty biased. Like we're two dudes who like spend time creating content around stuff we genuinely love. And one of the things we mention is all the heart and soul that you're putting into the show, how sometimes that's lost on people. And not that like criticisms aren't well warranted or people shouldn't have a space to like air what they didn't like about something,
Yeah,
but
sure.
it does make me sad when someone doesn't fully appreciate just like how much creativity and how much thoughtfulness. It's not really a question for you about it other than just kind of a remark of just appreciating all the work that you're putting into it. So
Well, I agree. My critics are subhuman vermin. If that's what you're saying, I 100%
yes, that's the
totally
quote,
agree.
that's the soundbite for this interview.
Listen, it's part and parcel. It's the way it goes.
Yeah.
Once your fandom or listenership, however you want to describe it, once the community, once it gets a certain size, there's always going to be people who just don't like it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's just if you can't handle that, you got no business hitting publish on anything. Especially these days with the internet, where everyone, anywhere, all the time, 24/7 can yell at you. So you got to have a strong stomach for it. But it's really
True.
not that big a deal.
Will, do you have any other questions you want to ask or?
I real quick. I know you got to go pretty soon, but and this might be something you can't really answer. But have you ever put any thought into what you might play if you ever got the chance to play in Umora?
Oh, okay. Well, okay. So someone asked me this question a while back, and I couldn't answer because the answer is an Antivalist. But I couldn't say
Oh,
anything because it was a fucking spoiler for the show. But now
Yes.
that we know that we have Antivalists, I would love to be an Antivalist
Yes.
from the Great Library of Nuara down in the Free Roads, and that would rule. That'd be great. Or a hedge mage. Or a spirit. Okay, listen.
You're like, yes,
A lot
all
of
the
good
characters.
options. No, I'm doing it. And yeah, and Tivoli Wizard for sure.
I love that.
What would be I guess my last question would be, what would be your absolute favorite moment, your singular moment from the show thus far?
Okay. I can't pick just one, but let me give you a rundown of my faves.
Yeah.
The very first word spoken, the preludes,
Mm.
snow falling on endless white sand. That was like being at the Trinity test. Like hearing that audio being sent to me for the first time was like you're a kid and you watch this stuff and you read it and you think in the back of your mind your entire life, one day there's going to be an extra door in my bedroom and I'm going to walk through it and there's going to be a talking lion there. And that happened to me. So like, I really feel like those opening words are an incantation that summoned everything that came after. And it does feel like magic entered my life at the moment I heard those. So that's, you can't go wrong with the beginning, right? Let there be light. I love, Lou's decision to imprison himself so that Naram can go free. That's right. That's a giant major moment.
Yeah.
Oh God, there's so many good moments. Okay. Uh, uh, the flashback with Erica and Brennan as Ren at the beginning of Arc 2, where she is remembering punching that girl at the fair, punching one of her bullies at the fair,
Yeah.
and the conversation they have in the cottage after, where Erica is just perfectly playing this kid that doesn't know what to do and has big feelings, and Brennan just does a character turn that any playwright or screenwriter would kill for.
Yes.
And it's happening organically at the table, and I love that scene with my whole heart, and I like, if you can listen to that scene and not sort of fall in love with the show, maybe the whole thing's not for you. You know, I mean, that to me is like, that's so much of the heart of it. The flight to Haverward in the Citadel, the day where Suvi takes them on the tour of everywhere,
Yeah.
and Ursula takes them on the tour, right? And they eat the big clam and the Galithopter flight down to Haverward. That's my favorite music I've written for the show, I think. And that scene, I was just like cheering like a fan in the stands for that one. That is a really fun moment. And then the Identify. Suvi's
Yes.
Identify at the end of Arc 3.
That was
like
crazy.
watching Brennan improvise that description off the top of his fucking dome.
Yes.
Not a word. That was barely edited. You are I might have taken out an or two, but like, you are hearing that guy at his peak. I mean, that is like, you're watching an artist just absolutely in the flow state there. No idea that scene was coming, and that's what he did. First take, boom.
Insane.
Insane. And then followed by the scene with Suvi and watching Abria also just like at her peak. That is my favorite thing she's ever done. I just think it's fantastic. So yeah, those 3 or 4 moments from the show that I think are, when I think of the show and what I love about it, that's what I think of.
Favorite moment from Arc 4?
Yeah. Big key spoilers for us to know.
I think the episode title, I'll tell you, the moment I stood up and yelled, and I didn't care, is the end of an episode that I think is going to be called "We're Going Home." I think the name of the episode is going to be, I don't know, I don't remember which number it is, but when you see, and the title might change, but if you see an episode called "We're Going Home," the end of that episode is my favorite beat.
Okay, I'll have to prepare accordingly.
But also, four is a big season. There's like a lot of giant stuff happens, and so I might listen to the first 5 episodes again and come up with a different moment. You know, God, you really put me in my head about it now. Think about it. Actually, we still have, I think we have like 7 episodes left to record of Arc 4. So there's still a lot to go. And let me tell you, we are in an incredible place. And we're not going to get to record again until January. So, God, it kills me. It kills me. You think waiting 2 weeks for an episode is hard? Look at what I have to go through.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Well, Taylor, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And this was, I'll just go ahead and speak for Will too. For me, at least, it was a dream come true. It was great to meet you and learn
Absolute
about your
honor.
process. And I just adore the show. So it's been great to talk to you. Will, I said I was going to speak for you. I'm not. You can say whatever you want
No,
to say.
yeah.
I mean,
An absolute honor. You're the most accommodating person ever. Like, like I told you, I did a triple take when I got that initial DM. So just thank you so much for being willing to do this. It was a joy.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Keep it up.
yeah.
Right
For the
back at you.
listeners, for the listeners, I guess you can check out Taylor. Is Twitter the best place for people to connect with you or follow your content? Or
Yeah. Come down in hell. Come find me in hell, like Orpheus.
I didn't mean to say that like so judgingly. Of like, so Twitter, right?
No, you
We're
live
going
in a
with
dumpster
that.
with a bunch of
Yeah.
rabid animals.
Yeah.
What's the address of the dumpster?
Yeah.
Yeah, Taylor.biz. Come down with me. I'm down by all the people who've committed treason.
Yeah.
Right at the bottom of hell.
Yeah. We have a certain listener and then not a certain listener, so that's okay. Well, we appreciate you, man. To our listeners, we appreciate you guys tuning in today, and obviously join the Discord and stay tuned for more Worlds Beyond content. And we'll catch you later.
Bye, y'all.